we're going to get started. So I'm not going to, the pattern packet starts with the jar lid, but that's like the least significant thing. So we're going to skip the jar lid for right now and just move on to the pot. We are going to dry brush with pumpkin on our thing and on our pot. I'm going to show you what I do. I like to use a Langnickel short round sable brush to dry brush with. And when I initially buy them, I'm going to show you this one. This one's bigger, so don't panic. But when you buy them initially, they're pointy. And this is a really good place for it to be if you paint any of my snowmen, because that's how I like to smoosh snowmen, and the pointier is better because you can get into corners. But after you use it for a while, it wears down. And this is like the perfect spot for me for dry brushing. It will wear down even farther, and that's still good for dry brushing. But this is the perfect spot for it to be. And so what I like to do, and as you can see, I shook pumpkin all over my palette. So I'm going to pick up pumpkin in this brush, and I'm going to rub it around on my palette. And I go in clockwise and counterclockwise motions. And what I'm doing is I'm working that paint into the bristles a little bit. Okay? Then the next thing I do is, and I'm just going to move my palette, I go to my towel or whatever it is I have behind. This camera likes to focus and unfocus. I wipe it out. So I kind of dried it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my hand. And I go to this area right here on my hand. And I rub it around. And when I hit that area on my hand, it's cold. It's cool. And once I take enough paint out of it, it's not cool anymore. It doesn't get hot. It just doesn't feel wet anymore. So then, let me get closer onto this pot. Ooh, that's a little too close. And what we're going to do is we are going to dry brush, highlighting through the center of this pot. So through the center of the rim. And you should have to scrub. You should have to scrub to get that color out of your brush. And I have to load some more paint in my brush, so I'm going to go through all of the steps again. Eventually my hand will have all kinds of colors on here. So we're just going through the center of this pot. And then I got to get my little bottom rim in here. Now this doesn't show up a whole lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to get out some marigold or golden straw, whichever one you have. I'm not going to shake this all over my palette. So with this dirty brush that already has pumpkin in it, you want to pick up some marigold on it and then go through all those steps again of rubbing it around on your palette, wiping it out on your towel, and going to your hand. So you get a lighter value of pumpkin. So we're going to dry brush again with that pumpkin marigold mix. And I'm going to keep this kind of right of center. So there, now you can see that a little better. So little right of center. Oops, a little too much paint there, but it'll be okay. On the bottom, I went ahead and went across the whole bottom. And down. I'm going to mess with you, make you seasick by going in and out. So that gives our bowl a little bit of dimension. Then you can wash that dry brush out. So we're going to do our first layer of floating, and that's going to be with Rookwood Red, and you also want to get out some soft black. So what we're going to do is we're going to float Rookwood Red down both sides of this pot to start with. So I'm going to go to this edge and do a nice float of Rookwood Red. And if you see, I'm kind of walking it across that top rim a little bit. And then we're going to go down the side of the pot. And then you want to go on the little base and walk it across a little bit. I'm going to turn mine around so it's a little easier for me, because it's all about me. So we also want to float a little bit of Rookwood Red inside the pot next to the cactus. This one is going to get totally washed out, so you don't covered up. So just on that left side, you want to touch a little Rookwood Red in that little bit of pot that you can see next to that cactus. It's really small, so kind of just tuck the tip of your side-loaded brush in that little corner. We also want to float Rookwood under this rim and above the bottom base. Right. Everywhere you shaded with Rookwood, you're going to shade again with soft black. This one you want to blend out so it's a nice soft float of soft black. So I'm going to go on the sides again. I'm not going to walk it out like I did the Rookwood. So down both sides and under the rim and above the base. Okay, and then under the rim and above the base. Okay, so you're going to need a liner brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some of that soft black. I think I just put it on my nose. And we're just going to paint in some little cracks and broken spots on our pot. I don't think you need to put a pattern on, but if you do, you can go ahead. But I just took a liner brush and I'm going to paint in 3 spots that are broken or cracked on my pot. Now if you don't want a broken and cracked pot, that's fine, but it's not, and they don't have to be exactly where I have them on the thing, but I'm just going to take my liner brush and kind of line pretty wide across the top edge, and then I'm just going to do, remember we did those tornado things years ago for eyes, so then you're just going to add some little cracks coming out from it. And I also put one under the rim. Maybe not as big or whatever. If you want to make your whole pot broken, that's fine if you don't like your pot. When you do this one on the bottom here, I want you to pay attention. It's pretty straight up and down from on the base part, but when you get to the bowl of the pot, you want to kind of angle it to follow the shape of the bowl. You don't want it, you could make it go straight up, but I think it looks a little more realistic if you angle it to follow that rounded shape of the bowl. You're going to take your liner brush and thin down some marigold, and we're just going to line a little highlight on the cracks on just one side. So I'm going to do mine, I'm just going to line, oh, get a point there, right along this left side on the cracks. And the left side of this little crack. And I'm even going to do the left side on the one on the bottom, even though it's on the other side. And it can be hit or miss. It doesn't have to be a perfect line following the edge. It can be hit or miss. And that just helps them look more like crafts. Okay, we're going to move on and start painting cactus. So you're going to need these three colors, warm white, Hauser dark green, and Hauser light green, in addition to the marigold that you have on your palette already. Your cactus was based in Hauser medium, so all three of those guys made an appearance. We are going to start by dry brushing, highlighting on each of these sections with Hauser light green. So good old dry brushing again. So I'm gonna go right through the centers of all of these sections. So if it's wide, it's going to be wide at the top, and then it's going to narrow down as you get next to the other cactus. And it's not going to show up a lot. We're going to brighten it up. And when you get that done, don't wash your brush out. You can pick up marigold on your dirty brush and dry brush brighter highlighting. Now, when it gets lighter, it covers a smaller area. Okay, so you don't dry brush quite as much with the marigold as you did with the Hauser light green. So I'm going to pick up some marigold on my dirty brush. And I'm going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight. And this is going to show quite a bit more on each section. And then you can wash that brush out. Alright, we're going to float shading on this cactus, and it's going to go in the bottom of each of those sections, the bottom of down here by the pot and around the cactus that's next to it, and that's with Hauser dark green. we are going to do this little, like a C-stroke float inside each of those cactus sections. It's just a little below the rim, so we end up with that little edge on each of those I don't know, petals or whatever sections. Anyway, so that's done with Hauser Dark Green too. Now notice these ones on the side here, I didn't come all the way down that top side, but this middle one I went all the way around and left a rim around the whole large sections. But on the smaller ones I kept it to one side or the other. And that's with Hauser Dark Green. So I'm going to, like this little guy, I'm going to start over here and leave a section like that, but not across the top of it, if that makes any sense at all. And then that larger center section, it's just going to go all the way around, all sides. Now this cactus also has little divots where the spikes come out. So they're just little C-strokes that you're going to set down there. You don't have to line them up like little soldiers or anything. You just want to go through on each section and add some little divots for the spikes to come out of. And that's with Hauser Dark Green also. So I'm going to do like 3 on some of them. They don't have to be perfect C-strokes either, so don't stress about that. Thank goodness. Nothing I do is perfect anymore. Of course, it never was, but... We're going to take our liner brush and Marigold, and we're going to line just a little highlight on that edge that we formed with that C-stroke float in each petal or whatever. I have to look this up and figure out what this is called. But with Marigold, you're going to line a little highlight on each of those little edges, and you're also going to line a little highlight at the base, below the base of each of those little divots. Okay? And that's with Marigold and your liner brush. Doesn't have to be a perfect line. It can be sketchy, and if you run out of paint, that's okay. But just come along, and on that edge that we formed with that C-stroke float in the each petal, you want to line a little Marigold. And then on that center one, it's just going to go across the top. It doesn't have to go all the way down the sides. And then just a little swipe of Marigold at the base of each of those divots. Just to make them stand out even a little bit more. And then with thinned warm white, you're going to line the little spines. They're called, I actually looked that one up, spines that come out of each divot. And there are 3 out of each divot. Or you could have two, I don't care. 2 or 3 out of each divot with thinned warm white. Just don't make them all the same length. In fact, I'm going to do 2 on some of them, just to be different. How are we doing? We have one more thing to do to this guy, and then we're done with this cactus, and we're going to move on. We want to add a little bit of more yellow into the top of each section on this cactus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a very well blended out float of marigold. So you want it to be kind of really transparent, and you just want to add just a touch of the yellow back into the top of each section. So yep, it goes right over some of those little spines that you just painted on. So we're going to work on this guy that you painted in forest green, plus a touch of Hauser medium. So forest green straight is fine. We're going to float some back-to-back highlights down these lines. These they're not spines, but whatever they are, with marigold. So you're going to, each of these lines that you have drawn on, you're going to float marigold on both sides of that line. So it ends up being a back-to-back float. And it goes on bright, but it tones down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to turn my piece over and do my other side. We are going to float back-to-back floats of Hauser dark green in between each of those sections that we just did. So if you want to take a chalk pencil and draw a line down the center of those, in between each of those back-to-back floats you just did, that will probably help you put these back-to-back Hauser dark green floats in. And this is also going to go on the outside edges with Hauser dark green. So again, I would start on one side and do all of one side and then come back and do the other side. So I'm going to go on this outside edge here with Hauser dark green. And then I'm just going to move over to that in between those highlight floats that I did with a float of Hauser dark green. I'm going to go down this outside edge and around that prickly pear cactus that we did. And then down and around the smaller, shorter arm of this cactus all the way down to the pot. And then I'm going to go in between those highlight floats I did with a float of Hauser dark green. So now I'm going to do the other side. And yes, you're covering up some of your highlights, but it will be okay. It's going to look kind of messy for a while. You also want to just add a float of Hauser dark green across the bottom of each of those cactus, of each of those sections. So next to the pot, just add a float across there. We're going to float some soft black deep in the shading on the outside edges and across the bottom of the cactus with soft floats of soft black. And that really helps to separate it from that cactus that's behind it. So as usual, I'm going to go down one side and then come back and go down the other. Now this guy has little barbs too, and they're lined up the spines that you highlighted, and they're with thin marigold, and they go poking out of both sides like little V's on the on this spine. And there's also some on the outside edge too, so don't forget that. But they're thinned marigold. Don't make them a career. They don't have to be perfect. You're really going to be able to see the ones on the outside edge a lot better because of that soft black shading. I saw a cactus yesterday that I actually didn't like the bloom, so naturally I didn't buy it. But it was an interesting one. It looked like it had hair as opposed to prickly things, and then its bloom just stuck straight out of the side, and it was just like, it looked like a rolled up piece of pink. It wasn't a bloom. That was all it got. It didn't open up or anything like that. For the little blossoms that are on the tops of this cactus, you're going to need dragon fruit, warm white, marigold, and soft black, which most of those you already have on your palette. But you're going to need dragon fruit. And you're also going to need that. If you have a number 4 filbert, I'm using a 6 because in my whole pile of brushes I can't find my number 4. So 4 or 6, and dragon fruit. So I just put like a little 5-petal flower on the top, one on the smaller, shorter cactus, and 2 at the top of the other one. And so just with your filbert, just stroke on some little 5-petal flowers. Oops, that'll be okay because the center gets covered up. And then on this one, I did 2. You can do more if you want. But just remember, you have to highlight each petal, and we're going to add centers. And You could do these with a round brush too if you're more comfortable painting petals with a round brush. So just wipe out your filbert brush. You still want it to have pink in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to just pick up a little bit of warm white on the tip of that brush, and then each of those little petals you're going to stroke a little highlight on the tip with that lighter dragon fruit, that dragon fruit warm white mix. If you need to pick up a little dragon fruit on your brush to get the pink back in it, that's fine too. But we're not looking for a perfect highlight, just a little smudge of light color on there. Okay, around the centers of each of those little, I think you can see it here, you want to just add a little stroke of marigold that forms the very center of the flower. So we're just going to take our liner brush and marigold, and I'll get close on one of these flowers. You're just going to do a little stroke around the center of marigold. It's not that big a deal, and there's no right number. You just put however many you want. So keep in mind, we're just going to stroke a little bit of warm white on each of those. So I'm just going to add some little marigold strokes just to add some interest to the center of that flower. We're almost done with this cactus. So then each one of those little yellow strokes, you just want to take your liner brush and line just a hair of a highlight in the tip of each of those strokes. It's not very much at all, but just enough to brighten them up a little bit. So I just basically set my brush down in the tip of each of those little strokes. And then you just add the centers with soft black in your liner brush. You just want to tap in a little center on each of those flowers. So we are going to work on this plant on the left side. And so you're going to need sea glass, evergreen, and soft black. Oh, and you're going to need warm white. We are going to dry brush highlighting on each section of each leaf. So each leaf has two sections. So down the center of each of those sections, we're going to dry brush highlighting with sea glass. So treat each half of the leaf as its own section. And you can wash your dry brush out because we're not going to lighten it up anymore. We're going to float shading at the base of each of those three leaves. And we're going to separate the leaves from each other and from the other cactus that is next to it. And then we're going to do a back-to-back down the center. So that's with evergreen. So to start with, we'll just float shading at the base of each of those leaves. So I'm going to go across the bottom here where it's going into the pot. And then I'm going to go across the bottom where it's next to the curled over leaf. And then on the bottom of this one. And if you want, you can walk that around that arm of that prickly pear that's in front of it. I also want to go underneath that bottom leaf where it curls. I want to go under that curl with a float of evergreen. Now, if you need to separate the leaves from each other, or they're next to another cactus, you want to float around that with evergreen. So I'm going to turn mine over again so I can float next to this cactus here. I'm going to go up all the way. And if you can see right, the middle leaf is kind of in front of that back leaf, and there's just a little hint of it underneath this one arm of the prickly pear. You want to float some shading in there next to that center leaf, just to set this one behind it. We're going to do back-to-back floats down that center vein line on this leaf with evergreen. So again, do one side and then come back and do the other side. We're going to add this striping on these leaves with thin sea glass, and they're just little hash marks that are line up to make a stripe across these leaves. So kind of like pulling prickly little barbs on something, but not quite. We don't shade or highlight those guys, so make as many as you want. This plant has little pointy things on the edge, around the edges of it, and all those are your liner brush and evergreen. You're just gonna kind of set down little points all along the edge. This top edge of this curled leaf, you don't go across that top edge, because that's not the edge of the leaf. That's just where it's folded over. So stop, do this edge here on the left, and then stop when you get to where it's folded over. Of course, we are going to deepen the shading where we separate the leaves from each other and at the base with soft floats of soft black. So just deepen the shading a little bit at the base and to separate the leaves from each other if you need to. And I'm going to deepen that shading under that curl a little bit. And yep, it's going on top of those little things you just put on there, but that's okay. And when you get done with that, you want to get out your pattern, your tracing, and you want to put the pattern on for, sorry, it's kind of shiny, it's got varnished. For this drooping cactus, it's in succulent. It's not a cactus, it doesn't have points. I would just put the center stem and maybe a few little slashes for where you want to put the leaves, and you also want to put on the pattern for this tall fire stick kind of cactus that comes out from behind. Oh, and you can put the pattern on for this guy here too. So the 3 remaining succulents, you want to put the pattern on for them. When you get that pattern on, rather than having you sit there doing nothing, you can go ahead and base in this cactus that's right in the front of the cactus we just painted, and of course it's in front of the other 3 too, but you can base that in with bright salmon. If you have yours spaced in already, you can dry it and put the pattern on for the separation and for the leaves that are in the center. But if you haven't finished it yet, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. We'll put the pattern on later. We are going to go work on this droopy cactus, droopy succulent that's on the right side. And what I want you to do is I want you to line the stems first with jade green. You're going to need your number 4. Ooh, need to shake my jade green up. You can, there are going to be petals that go on top of other petals, so it might get a little confusing, but don't worry about it with this initial base coat, because you can pick which ones are on top when we add the color on them. So first, with your liner brush, you want to line the stems for these with jade green. And they can be a little thicker. They don't have to be so skinny. So we're going to add those little petals on these stems. They're kind of like wheat or ferns where you would line them on. I would probably do the third stem from the left first, because it's the one that's behind. And so you're just going to use your filbert and stroke on some little petals on each of these stems. And like I said, it might get a little confusing, but when we shade and highlight and tint, we'll be able to figure them out. We'll pick which ones we want on top. So just little filbert brush little leaves along those stems. And you can hop around the stem, so like this guy can dry, so I'll go do the one on the far outside and stuff. So just move around. we're gonna let those dry and go over here and work on the fire stick ones. And those are going to be painted with chartreuse yellow or margarita, whichever one you're using. And they are kind of like, I want to say comma strokes. So the tip of them is going to be fat and then it's going to thin down. So each one of those little stems and its little offshoots is like a fat comma stroke with chartreuse yellow. So I'm going to set my brush down and make a fat end, and then it's not real thin again either. You can keep it pretty thick, but I'm going to go and do the main sections of it, and then I'll come back and add the extra little shoots that come off of it. We are going to kind of work on a couple of them at the same time, just because we use the same color. So on all those little leaves that you just painted on this cactus, succulent, I gotta quit calling it a cactus, on the right side, you're gonna float just a touch of highlighting in the tip of each of those leaves, just the ones that are on top. So now you get to start deciding which leaf is on top with warm white. So just in the tip of each leaf, and this should be, you could do this really fast. You don't have to spend a lot of time. We're just looking to brighten up the tip of those leaves. So you float a little stroke of warm white in the tip of each leaf, or petal, or whatever we're going to call them. You're also going to go to this salmon colored succulent, and you're going to float a warm white highlight in the tip of each of those petals. And I know it's not, we're going to put another color on top of it, but for right now you just need to brighten up the tips with warm white. We're going to go back to this drooping succulent on the right side, and you're going to take your liner brush and warm white and just line a little highlight on each of the stems that you can get to. If it's underneath, you don't have to worry about it too much, just line here and there. But just a warm white highlight on the stems. Going to have you get out a few 5 colors. Desert cactus, Indian turquoise, dragon fruit, forest green, and evergreen if you can't get into any of it, and purple cow. So 6 colors. We're going to continue to bounce around on these cactus so we can do some things and let them dry. We're going to work on the bright salmon cactus, the squatty cactus in the front. You're going to trust me on this, okay? we're going to float shading at the base of each petal with Desert Cactus. So this is going to separate the petals from each other if they're in front of, behind something, and just tuck it into the bottom of each petal. So we're just floating Desert Cactus at the base of each of these petals or leaves or whatever we're going to call them. Okay, we're going to go back to this droopy cactus, succulent, and you're going to touch a little bit of shading at the base of each of those petals with Evergreen. So it's another one of those, just kind of stick the corner of your brush in at the base of each of those petals. You just want to give it a little hint of darker green. We'll go back to this squatty succulent. Hey, I said it right. And where we shaded Desert Cactus before, we're going to float some forest green. We're going to deepen it. It doesn't need to be as wide. It doesn't need to go as far up the petal as the Desert Cactus, but you just want to get some of this color in at the base. We're going to float forest green at the base of those stems, wherever they go behind on the fire sticks, the chartreuse yellow things. You're going to touch forest green at the base of the stems or wherever they go behind something, and at the base of each of the little petals that you pulled out. So it's another one of those touch your brush in there things. And these are thin, so it is basically just touch the chisel edge of your brush at the base of each of the petals, and wherever it hooks to the main stem or goes behind another cactus. We're going to go back to this drooping succulent, and in the tip of each of those leaves or petals, you want to touch just a bit of Indian turquoise. Yep, it goes right on top of that warm white float that you did, but you needed that warm white float. So Indian turquoise, just tint the tips of each of those little petals with a little bit of Indian turquoise. Don't make it a career. And you don't have to worry about the ones that are behind. You don't have Indian turquoise, desert turquoise plus a little warm white will work. We're going to go to those fire sticks, back to the fire sticks, the chartreuse yellow things, and they're going to get just a touch of color on their tips with Purple Cow. So just in the tip of every little petal, you're going to add some purple cow. So we're done with the fire sticks. We have one more thing to do to this drooping succulent up here, and it's really simple. You're just going to take your flat brush and some evergreen and make a little wash, and then this stem that's in the very back, we want to really put it back there. So I'm just going to wash some evergreen over it. It doesn't matter if it gets on the background, but I just want to stick it way behind. And then you can also just wash a little bit of evergreen around the center where all those stems come out. So on that squatty cactus, we're going to really pink up the tips of that, of their petals with a little float of dragon fruit. So just brighten up the pink part of that plant, just the very tips. Tuck a little dragon fruit in them. Okay, there's two things to do. You're going to take your liner brush and thinned forest green, and just out of the centers, just add a few little detail lines. So from the base of the leaves, and it doesn't have to be all of them. Just when you can see more of the center of a leaf, just pull a few little lines out. So there are actually several that I don't do anything on. With your liner brush and thinned warm white, you just want to define one side of each of those petals a little more. I'm looking for the top side of each one. So you're going to need deep midnight blue, desert turquoise, and warm white. And we're going to do some dry brushing. And we're going to dry brush with warm white on the jar lid. And what you're going to do is you're going to treat each of those little humps as a section, a rim. So let me get a little closer. So we're going to dry brush warm white across those sections to start forming those ridges. I'm going to dry brush warm white through this top edge of the jar itself, which is right under the lid. I'm going to get as much dry brushing of warm white in that neck of the jar, which is that skinny part. And then all of the negative space in the jar that's around the cactus and the pot, we want to dry brush some warm white highlighting. So just go on that background all around and in between the cactus. Even in this little area right here, in between the prickly pear and the other cactus, you want to touch a little warm white highlighting. Anywhere you can get your brush in and see background. On the lid, we're going to float shading with Deep Midnight Blue. And it's going to go, I want you to treat each of those little ridges as its own little thing. So it's going to be like a little C-stroke float of Deep Midnight Blue on both sides. And then you're going to do a bigger C-stroke float to form the top of that lid. So you can go in here and do this bigger float and kind of walk it across a little bit so it fills in that area a little more. And then each ridge gets its own little float of Deep Midnight Blue. So I do want to pull some shading in through the center of to separate those ridges from each other. It's not on the ridges, it's underneath or above. And the way I want to do that is I'm going to side load my flat brush just like I was going to do a float, but I'm going to stay on the chisel edge and I'm going to be just in that ditch of where the ridge is, and I'm just going to stay in on the chisel, just pull some of that side loaded color across. And I'm going to do it from both sides so it can meet in the middle. So with your a round brush or even that filbert that you used earlier, we're just going to take some warm white and just drag a brighter highlight across those ridges from the right side across. And that's just going to make them stand out a little bit more. And you can also kind of drag your brush across the top edge a little bit. I'm not actually on the piece. I kind of have my brush at an angle on the edge, so I can leave a little bit of warm white across that top edge. You're going to float Desert Turquoise down the sides, across the bottom of the jar itself, and yes, even if it goes over cactus, it's okay. But I want you to treat each section as its own separate piece. So on this neck, or the ridge at the top, I'm going to pull that float and stop. This is Desert Turquoise. I'm going to float in the neck and kind of walk it across a little ways. And then I'm going to pull down the side all the way down. And just go across the bottom with desert turquoise. I'm going to back up a little bit. So I'm going to take it all the way across the bottom. And then I'll go up down the other side. Okay, so I'm going to go down this side. You're also going to float this along the top of that top ridge under the lid. All with desert turquoise. I'm also going to go across the top of the main part of the jar under the neck. I'm going to go across the top of the neck, so you're just going to turn your brush a little sideways and tuck some shading on the neck. I'm going to tighten up a little bit just so I can show you this float. You're going to float warm white highlighting down the sides and across the bottom of the jar again over the desert turquoise, but you want this float to be just a hair inside the edge. So it's not right on the edge, just a hair inside the edge. So warm white, again, treat each section as its own little entity. But you see how it's not right on the edge? It's just a hair off the edge. And when you do this on the sides of the jar, you want to start a little ways in. So I'm going to start here and pull the float across and then down that side. But you're going to do this all the way around. The sides and the bottom of the jar. And that's warm white. Just got a little bit of dry brush highlighting to do and a little bit of a stroke of a highlight, and you'll be done. Alright, we're going to dry brush some brighter warm white highlights in what I'm going to call the corners, which is going to be the top and the bottom. They're not really corners, but so I'm just going to dry brush a brighter warm white highlight in there in each corner. Oops, that got a little heavy, but oh well, it'll work. And you're also going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight on the rim, the top rim. You just want to brighten that up a little bit. And that can go all the way across. So I did in the four corners, and I did across that top rim of the jar. I brightened that up. And then just like we did on the right side of the lid with our round or liner and warm white, we're gonna stroke just a little bit brighter highlight in the corners of each section. So I'm gonna do on both sides of the rim, both sides of the neck, and then in the tops of the corners with warm white, a round brush, a liner brush, whatever you want to use. So just a little bit more of a highlight in those areas, just to brighten it up a little bit. Now on the original piece, I did dry brush kind of a wide section down the right side across the cactus and stuff, but I don't want to do that to this one. I don't want to mess up that cactus. So it's completely up to you if you want to do a wider dry brushed highlight that goes down the right side. It will go right on top of that cactus with the pretty pink flowers. I'm going to float just a little bit of very well blended out desert turquoise on the background, on the jar, here and there around the larger cactus. Don't worry about the smaller ones, the drooping one or the fire stick, but like here in the area where there's an opening between the prickly pear cactus and the larger cactus with the flowers, you want to touch a little desert turquoise shading in there. And I probably will go across the top of the prickly pear and just tuck this in here and there. It doesn't have to go all the way around. And that's desert turquoise. Just blend it out so it's nice and soft. I'm going to go on the side of this cactus a little bit above the drooping cactus, the drooping succulent. Just enough to pop it off the background a little bit. Alright, now this is a completely up to you decision. I did it on the original. I don't know that I'm going to do it on this one. But when I painted this originally, I thought it needed to look like the glass was over the cactus, so it was inside. Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's completely up to you. So what I did is I just mixed some jade green with a touch of desert turquoise, and I did a soft glaze over the whole thing. And that was just some wild hair I got. It's completely up to you, but jade green and desert turquoise to give me kind of a glass color. But I just washed it over the whole thing. And see, I don't like it now, but I did then. So it's completely up to you. It gives it kind of a yellowy greeny hue, But if you want to try it, have a wet rag handy in case you don't like it. But other than that, you are done. And that's something you can always decide if you want to do later. But there you go. We finally got this thing painted.